My name is Jane Burriss. In 1988, when I was just 22 years old, I was attacked and stabbed 27 times and left for dead. I am a survivor. In the 1970s and 80s, women's bodies started to surface in the Connecticut River Valley between New Hampshire and Vermont. Is my case related to these cases? This is unknown. Why? Because all the cases still remain unsolved. Are all the cases related in the work of one serial killer? We don't know that either. But law enforcement did form a task force in the 80s to investigate all of them. I've joined forces with my co-host Amanda and Drew. Together, we are a voice for the voiceless. We advocate for those who cannot advocate for themselves while remaining factual and engaging with empathy. The Invisible Tears team is transparent and opinionated, never claiming to be anything we are not. We aren't law enforcement, we aren't private investigators or journalists. We are victim advocates who care and want to help families.
So make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any episodes. You can find us on all platforms through our link tree in the show notes. There you can find our social media platforms, our YouTube, and our website with our merch. You can also find our Patreon there. So if you're interested in supporting and joining the Invisible Tears team, join our Patreon today. And as always, ratings and recommendations help our podcast in algorithms. So if you haven't shown us some love and given us a 5-star rating and review, please do so. We appreciate each and every one of you and your continued support.
Welcome to Invisible Tears. I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Amanda. Good morning, Amanda.
Good morning, Jane. How is it going?
It is going, you know.
Yes,
life.
I do.
It's just life, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. Make the best of it.
We do.
Work hard. Mm-hmm. Work hard and try to make the best of life.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
It is.
So we are going to talk about a very interesting unsolved case. Is it unsolved?
Yes, it is.
I honestly don't know what this is. I have not read the overview. So Amanda's going to give us the overview and we're going to all hear it at the same time. And I'll pop in with questions and reactions because of what Amanda was telling me. This is quite an interesting unsolved case.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Take it away, Amanda.
Thanks, Jane. All right. Yes. So this actually came in as a request from our listeners. And this was well over a year ago, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. Periodically, we had put out on our social medias. Do you guys have any, suggestions? What do you want us to cover? What do you want us to talk about? We were asking for that. And the case of the unsolved murder of Judith Vieweg came up. And pretty consistently along with Judith's name was Debbie Quimby as well. So, spoiler alert, she's going to come probably next overview. But when I was looking at the overviews, I was like, okay, let's just start diving in. So today we're going to look at the unsolved murder of Judith Elaine Vieweg. I know that we love to start at the beginning a little bit and pull some information about her. So I definitely did that, or as much as I could. Judith was born February 20th, 1942 in Westminster, Massachusetts, to her parents, Ernest and Emiley. I love that name, Emiley. Yes, I saw the name. I was like, that's so beautiful. I love that name.
It really is.
Judith has 3 brothers, Martin, Gordon, and Ernest, and a sister, Carol. Judith was a graduate of Gardner High School and graduated Fitchburg State College in 1964. She was a teacher, specifically an art teacher. And she was also the vice president of the Middlesex Union Teachers Association and served as a part-time teacher of art at the Fitchburg Museum. All about teaching, all about the art. In September of 1973, Judith was a fourth grade teacher at the Spalding Memorial School in Townsend, Massachusetts. And again, teaching art. She was well known in the community as an extremely talented artist as well. The school and the school board said she was beloved by everyone, including all of her students. Judith lived at 393 Main Street in West Townsend, Massachusetts. And at just 31 years old, she was found murdered on Sunday, September 9th, 1973. That's how far back we're going with this one. It's an old one. So on Sunday, September 9th, 1973, Judith's body was discovered at 11:30 a.m. in the woods right behind her home by one of her neighbors, Leroy Schofield. He had actually said that he had heard her dog, the dog's name was Emma, consistently barking outside her home, which was odd. And he noticed that her door was wide open. So he went to go inspect and check on her. And as he searched a path behind her house, so obviously he went in, searched her house, nothing there, went and started searching around her house. As he was searching a path behind her house, and apparently it sounded like she consistently walked her dogs on those paths, or her dog on that path, only about 100 feet from her home on that path, he found a body wrapped in a blanket and covered in heavy rocks and tree debris. He immediately called the police. Turns out it was Judith, and she had been stabbed several times in the chest. I was able to find an article that was published a little bit later on. It was a little bit more specific. Judith was stabbed 19 times, and the wounds were to the chest, the upper body, and the lungs. Her body was found fully clothed, though, and the medical examiner, George Curtis, said that she had not been sexually assaulted or molested. The estimated time of death was early that Sunday morning, so she was found fairly quickly. They approximated between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. Later on in articles, the police also did say that it was evident that she fought hard, so she must have had some defensive wounds. A couple of days later, by September 11th, the Lowell Sun reported that Judith's car, a 1969 Chevy Camaro, was found in Robichaud sand pits off Turnpike Road, about 1.5 miles from her home. Apparently, a gravel pit worker found the car and also found Judith's handbag along with it. The car was dusted for fingerprints. It's interesting because the article said that it was dusted for fingerprints, but then they also said no indication if any prints were found or not. It was actually stated that way in the article. So it was dusted for prints. We don't know if there was actually prints found. And then the Townsend police chief at the time, Irving Marshall, said no other clues were found or revealed. No murder weapon was ever found either. They extensively searched around the perimeter of her home and even in the sand pits where her car was found. In an article that was published a little bit later on, the police did theorize that the murder weapon may have actually been disposed of in the sand pits too. I actually ended up finding a picture of where her car was in the sand pits, and it appears as if it's near, like within the sand pits, there was like a sewage pond almost, and it was right near there. So I think the theory is, since they couldn't find anything in the woods or anything like that, that possibly where her car was put, the murder weapon was disposed of there.
Now, this is a small town.
Yes. Townsend, Massachusetts in
Very small
1973.
town.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Everybody knew everybody.
Yes. Police also quickly theorized that they weren't sure if they were actually looking for a single individual or multiple individuals. And they said that they basically determined that because of how her body was found. So it wasn't just that it was covered, she was covered in a blanket, but because of how heavy the rocks were and the debris was that was on top of her in an attempt to essentially conceal her, they're like, we don't know if it's one or multiple. They also went on public record, the police did, as saying that there was no evidence of robbery.
Right.
So they weren't able to determine any sort of motive at all. And I believe that they still don't have one.
Now, she lived alone. She was not married.
Yes.
She had no kids.
Nope. Yep.
Mm.
Alone with her dog, Emma.
Almost sounds like a personal attack.
Right. Yeah. That's what I initially thought too, especially with how she was found. The big attempt in like concealment. I mean, sometimes even if bodies are wrapped too, there's that shows some sort of sign of like remorse as well. So I would be surprised, honestly, if she didn't actually know her attacker. That's the vibe that I got when I was researching this.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, Jane, you alluded to, small community, and this community was absolutely devastated. In fact, the entire school district closed on the day of her funeral. So her funeral was the
Wow.
Wednesday after she was found on that Sunday, and all the flags at the schools flew at half mast until her funeral.
Now, this was a Sunday, right? That
Yes.
she passed, that they found her. She was passed. That
Yep.
was a Sunday morning.
Yep. So she was found later morning, and the estimated time of death was 4 to 5 o'clock in the morning. So they found her within 5 to 7 hours of her.
Now, I'm not sure if they shared this or not, but if they're estimating 4 a.m., 5 a.m., was she dressed in clothes, like daily clothes, or was she in pajamas?
That's actually a great question. Well, I didn't actually write it in this overview with all the articles that I read. I believe it did say something about pants and a sweatshirt. Like it didn't say anything about pajamas. So I believe she was dressed in sort of everyday clothes, but comfy clothes.
Okay.
Great question. So, in a hope to help the investigation, the North Middlesex Regional School District Teachers Association offered a $1,000 reward. Now, this wasn't the state. This was the Teacher Association for any information relating to the murder of Judith. And in a published statement, they actually said, and this is a quote, "In the sincere hope that that person or persons responsible for the death of Judith can be brought to justice as soon as possible, the NMRS Teachers Association is hereby offering a reward in the amount of $1,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the one or ones responsible." A memorial fund was also established in Judith's name by the Spalding Memorial School. It was determined that the funds would actually be used to initiate a painting loan service at the Townsend Public Library in memory of Judith. So essentially the program, what it is it provided paintings to be loaned from the library in a similar manner, kind of like how you go to the library and check out books. So it's just with paintings.
Yeah.
And each of those paintings was actually marked with a plaque in Judith's memory.
Wow.
I know. And in more somewhat related news, Judith's actual art prints were actually presented to the library for public viewing as well after this, memorial fund was established in a collection entitled Judith Vieweg Memorial Collection. So it's really apparent that she was extremely embedded in the community, beloved, talented, and
she was only 31 years old, Amanda.
Yeah.
And she was that much involved with her community that her community loved her so much. Oh, wow.
I know. I mean, she was even the vice president of the Teachers Association at 31.
31. Wow.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, right after she graduated college, she started immediately teaching. I saw the ranges of years vary a little bit. So I'll basically say like 7 to 9 years as a teacher, basically. And I believe that most all of her career was at the Spalding Memorial School. So yeah, extremely beloved, extremely embedded in the community. And she was beautiful. I was able to find a couple of pictures of her as well. She was beautiful. Her dog was extremely cute as well. So that all happened to Judith on September 9th, 1973. So by October 5th of 1973, so close to a month later, while police were reporting, because they were consistently being asked, so there were many articles, no update, no update, no update, right? But by this time, police were reporting that there weren't any updates in Judith's case. But the police chief, Irving Marshall, actually did say that his department was comparing notes with the Fitchburg Police Department to see if there was any connection between the slaying of Judith and the double murder that had just happened in Fitchburg. This alludes me into, I have to sort of paint a picture of what was happening in the area during this time. So we're going to talk about just a few other cases. Obviously, this overview is dedicated to Judith, but everyone sort of needs to know what was happening in such a quick succession of time within a very small footprint. So I completely understand why this case and a couple of other cases were actually suggested to us. It was kind of alluding to there was a big problem happening in a small area during this time. So that's why people wanted us to do this overview. So that double murder the police chief was referring to was the death of Joanne Muldoon and Deborah Johnson. They were both just 20 years old. They were roommates. They were living in a second floor apartment at 58 Intervale Road in Fitchburg, Mass. And both of the women were stabbed to death, multiple stab wounds in the neck with no evidence of sexual assault. Police later said that because of the lack of defensive wounds, they think it was likely that they were sleeping or they may have even been drugged at the time. But this happened the evening of Sunday, September 30th, 1973. So just 3 weeks after Judith. And as a side note, with that case, it was stated that there were prints found with that case. Nothing ever mentioned about that being found with Judith's case, but with that case, there was. So that wasn't the only case that had happened. So I'll just do like a quick summary. I'll quickly recap like the other cases that were happening in the vicinity. And I'll do it in order too. So first, we have the bodies of a mother and daughter found in the family car in Rutland, Massachusetts State Park. Multiple stab wounds to the neck and body. The mother was Maureen Moynihan, and she was a teacher at the West Boylston Public School. She was 32, and her daughter was only 4. Her daughter's name was Jennifer, and they were both found murdered in the same way. And that happened on June 6th, 1973. So very close proximity.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Judith that we were talking about right now, right? Found stabbed to death right behind her home, September 9th, 1973 in Townsend, Massachusetts. Then we have the 2 roommate murders that I just overviewed, right? Joanne and Deborah, a 20-year-olds, found September 30th, 1973 in Fitchburg. Next, we have the murder of 18-year-old Marcia Timon. She was a resident of Newton, Mass., and she was found stabbed 67 times in the chest.
My God.
Yes. Brutal assault. She was found near a roadside rest area in Harvard, Massachusetts, in a picnic area on Tuesday, October 16th, 1973. It was theorized that she had possibly been hitchhiking or had accepted a ride from a friend or an acquaintance of some sort. The hitchhiking theory comes from the last conversation that she had actually had with her mother by phone the Monday night before, saying that she told her mom she would get home however she needed to, because her parents were actually leaving for vacation to go to Florida. So she was trying to get from Brighton to their family home in Newton. Never made it there.
How old was she?
18. Yep. 18 was a high school graduate, just graduated high school.
Wow.
And then you have Clara Jean Provost. She was just 23 years old when she was found dead in her bed in her apartment at 30 Lunenburg Street in Fitchburg, and her throat had been slit. This was on January 6th of 1974. Now, specific to this case, Clara's case, has actually been prosecuted and there's been a conviction. So in February of 2012, Ronald C. Dame was found guilty of first-degree murder of Clara. The case was essentially, to summarize the entire case, it was essentially a slam dunk because his DNA was found underneath her fingernails. So, with all of those cases sort of being outlined, you can imagine within this footprint and within this time frame, like such a quick succession, really. I mean, June of 1973 through January, the beginning of January of 1974, 7 bodies, 7 women, right?
Amanda,
Yes.
this is screaming serial killer.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Like, totally screaming serial killer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, and remember the time too, right? 73, 74. So there was clearly a very big problem in this area of Massachusetts in a very short span of time. So, I mean, I even looked in the maps too, because it was also I previously said that Judith was a part-time art teacher at the Fitchburg Museum. So like where Judith lived to like the Fitchburg Museum is 9 miles.
Yeah.
You know, it's all very close. And if you're from that area, you know, I don't have to tell you. The places that we're talking about are very close. So people were freaked. Lots of articles that were published were outlining all of the cases together as well. So the only reason why I just outlined all of the other cases is to really set a scene. People have to understand what was happening during this time and why those articles, if you go and search, why those articles actually exist. So many of them, stabbings. In all of them, no sexual assault. In many of them, focus on the neck. The more I researched this case, the more of an eerie feeling I had at the pit of my stomach. So after we outline that with all the other cases that were occurring during this time, essentially, there were no other articles that were published that were specific updates to Judith's case, because there weren't any updates to Judith's case, which is crazy. Like, did you find DNA? Did you find prints? Did you know?
Right. With the technology today, they should have some kind of updates.
Right.
What was she wrapped in?
A blanket.
Touch DNA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on now.
One can only hope, because we are seeing news about a lot of really good stuff happening with the advanced DNA and the genetic genealogy front. And especially Massachusetts hasn't been shabby about what they're doing with the advances in technology. So one can only hope that sometime soon we will have some sort of additional update, right, on Judith's case. And hopefully everything was collected and preserved correctly.
I guess my concern is I'm hoping that after all these years, she still has some family advocate asking for updates on her case and trying to. I'm hoping they're not forgetting about her case,
right,
in the law enforcement.
Right. Me too. I know that her parents have passed. I did see that. Both of her parents, unfortunately, have passed, and her sister has passed as well. I found that on the Find a Grave. You know how they can link the relatives, and so hoping that that means that her brothers are still alive, and or possibly, you know, coworkers, family, friends, that sort of thing, still alive and still advocating for her. As far as I know, and as far as I can tell, her case is extremely cold.
But her case, Amanda, to me, her case seems so solvable today.
Me too.
Like between the fingerprints in the car that they may have found, the touch DNA on her blanket, they must have found, if it was a path, maybe some kind of footprints or something. I mean, to me, her case seems so solvable today with the technology.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree. I do. I 100% agree. Like I said, I just hope that everything was preserved correctly, given that we're, going back to 73 with it. I'm not going to assume that it wasn't, right? I'm going to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and hope that everything was preserved in the correct manner so further testing can be done. In her case, it was interesting because there was a consistent theme through many of the articles relating to Judith. All of the cases of all the women were being listed. Obviously, police would not say they're connected. They never will. They'll never say that publicly, until they can forensically actually link, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cases. But I did find a snippet from the police chief that was interesting because none of the other articles had it in it. When asked just point blank, and this was at least a few months after Judith's murder, do you feel like they're connected? Are there any connections? Are there any similarities? Like what can you talk about with that? He said the only similarities that exist are that they're stabbings and that they were killed in a home. And I paused and I just kept on rereading that. And I was like, there was no mention in any of the initial articles. It was only where she was found, right? But then I go back to the neighbor, right, saying like the front door was open and that's why the dog was barking. So I guess it's kind of undetermined as well where Judith, unfortunately, was murdered. Based and solely based off of that statement. And I don't know if it very well could have been like a misquote because that was one of the only places that I found it. But I thought that was interesting as well because there was also no type of detail saying that like the house was secured, like crime scene. You know what I mean? Like things like that. Yeah. So that was another interesting piece. I was like, okay, odd. So naturally with these overviews too, what I do is I think I've explained this to you before, but I don't know if I've ever actually put this out there for our listeners. When I do an overview for a case, obviously I really utilize newspapers.com to get good source documents from like original source documents from the time in which cases were occurring. But when I do that, I start from the date that the case happened and I go to current. And I don't limit it to any sort of area or state or anything like that. I just simply was searching on Judith's name. And so because of the way that I search, a couple of other articles actually ended up coming up. Because now would be the time when we would potentially talk about like theories or suspects or if anybody was ever questioned and things like that. We hate to do this to you, but we have to break for our sponsors. Thanks for hanging in there. Now back to the episode. So the first article that I found in regard to any sort of questioning of any sort of thing was about an escaped killer named Jeffrey A. Ward. He was convicted and sentenced in 1987 to 8 life terms plus 140 years in prison without parole after he walked into the police department and confessed to raping and murdering a 38-year-old woman and a 14-year-old girl in Norfolk, Virginia. He strangled them with a guitar string. Apparently, he had found Jesus, and so that's why he ended up walking into the police department and confessing to what he had actually done. This article actually outlined that he had escaped, and the reason why it was actually written and it was directed towards the Townsend, Massachusetts residents is because he actually grew up in Townsend and his family still lived there. So it was actually a huge article that was put out saying, heads up, he broke out.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I was reading this and I was like, well, this is creepy. And I was like, okay, Townsend, as I'm reading the article, I'm like, why did this pop up in my search? It was so weird. It's because in this article, it was quoted that Middlesex County authorities questioned him about several unsolved cases in Massachusetts, including Judith's murder. So This is somebody that was
Right.
questioned. And clearly there's, he was never charged. And don't worry, guys, he was found within like 2 days. Like,
So he's
like,
back in jail.
he's back in jail.
Okay. Okay.
He's back in
That's
jail.
useful information there to share,
Yes.
Amanda.
But it was just the article itself was just like interesting, right? His family still lived there. And it basically said that again, they're warning residents, be vigilant. They even said that the cops actually went to his family residence and started questioning him about his whereabouts. This prison escape actually happened in February of 1996. And the place where he escaped from was in Virginia. He was caught just 15 miles away from the prison, I think within like a day and a half or 2 days, in pretty poor condition. So he never made it to Massachusetts. So that article came up because he was questioned. Okay, good to know, because no other article specific to Judith had actually ever told us that. Crazy. Yeah. And
I can only imagine your reaction looking at that and say, why is that here?
Right. And then, the next one gets even better, Jane.
Oh, gosh.
The next one gets... I can't even, and I apologize, guys. I'm not laughing because of, the content in this overview or anything like that, but
absolutely not.
Sometimes the stuff that I find is just absolutely insane. And I can tell you, when this next article popped up, I was so shocked and so animated. You guys see me. I'm animated. So animated that my husband stopped doing work and asked me if I was okay and started laughing at me. He was like, "What is wrong with you?" And it was because this huge article pops up in my search. And it was an article that was posted by the Lowell Sun. And the title was, "Police Seek Keen Link in 10 Unsolved Slayings." And it was published July 8th of 1976. And yes, they are talking about Keene, New Hampshire. This is how big the article is.
Oh my, let me see the top. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
In Keene, New Hampshire.
In Keene, well, I kept on.
What year?
1976.
What?
Yeah. Yes. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, you guys have all heard like our history. You guys know where Jane lives. You guys, I've told all of you guys, I've literally moved, I personally moved to Keene in 1989, and I lived in Keene or right outside of Keene until I moved down to Black Mountain. I mean, technically Nelson's a little bit further away. Drew and I lived in Nelson, about 15-ish minutes outside of Keene. But I mean, so the Keene area, I grew up in Keene. I really did. And so I see this headline, I see how big the article is, and I realize that they actually are talking about Keene, New Hampshire. And I'm like, what? This is how the article starts. Police departments throughout northern Massachusetts are actively re-evaluating 10 unsolved murders in connection with information on a gang of alleged killers that have been operating out of Keene, New Hampshire. The Keene gang has already been linked to 6 murders, including the Tewksbury slaying of 3 members of the Mahoney family. Have you actually heard of the Mahoney family murders? Okay.
I have not.
Okay. I'll make sure and review that as well. Or at least a brief overview of that as well. Police investigators declined to definitely tie the killers to more murders, but confirmed that other cases are being reevaluated. Essentially, every single unsolved case in and around Keene or in northern Massachusetts was being reevaluated once this broke.
Wow.
Yeah. So Townsend, Harvard, Shrewsbury, and Fitchburg police are taking a closer look at homicides in their communities through leads being developed in the Middlesex County as a result of the information being supplied by informants on the Mahoney murder case. Essentially, what happened is someone within this gang flipped and became an informant.
Ooh.
Yes. The oddness of me talking about a serious gang, though, in Keene, where they're actually committing murders, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, and I mean, let's reevaluate that. Back in the 70s and early 80s, Keene was not that big of a town back then.
No.
I mean, it's just grown in population, I'm going to say the last 15, 20 years.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
Keene was not a very big city. I still would have considered it a town back in the late 70s, in the 70s and early 80s.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yep. No, I
to hear that for us, no, and we're very familiar with Keene, to hear that information is just mind-blowing to me. Like, holy crap.
Yeah. I sat there and I was like, this can't be real. I think I even said that out loud, and Drew proceeded to laugh at me. I was like, this can't be real. This can't be real, because then as I'm proceeding to read even further, they're describing it a little bit more. They're like, okay, there's an informant that's flipped from this gang. And I'm like, oh, okay, gangs in Keene. Yeah, da, da, da.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, sure. Yeah. They used to call me and my friends a gang. We weren't a gang, you know, like, I'm like, whatever. But no, there was a Keene, New Hampshire based gang of 40 men.
So is this mafia? So to me, hearing men, boys, okay, young men, young boys, I would say, okay, they're gang members, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing men,
right,
40 men, automatically pops mafia into my head.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. It might actually help. So I'm going to pause on this article a little bit and just give a very, very brief overview of that Mahoney case.
Okay.
Because that's how everything essentially ended up breaking. So that Mahoney murder case, on New Year's Eve in 1975, there was a home invasion, robbery turned homicide that occurred in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Dr. Mahoney, his wife, and his 15-year-old son were murdered. And it turned out that 4 men had gone to the Mahoney home with the intention of robbing a wall safe, apparently. Donald Wilson was the person who was the driver. He ended up flipping, right? And therefore didn't enter the house, didn't participate in the murders or anything like that. His brother, Robert Wilson, entered the house along with Robert Smith and Terrence Milan. The robbery went wrong from the beginning, and they shot and killed the entire family. So Donald Wilson, the driver, testified against the rest of the gang, right? These members of the gang. And they all ended up actually getting jail time. What's interesting about this is that within that case too, so now the case has been, tried, in convictions. Oddly enough, 2 of the guys were already incarcerated for other crimes as well, other murders, I believe. They weren't older. They were mid-20s, I want to say, when this occurred. And it was actually stated in a couple of articles that these ones that did the Mahoney murders, or the attempted robbery gone wrong that turned into murders, they were like the leaders. And I later saw indications that they were referencing the Troy Boys as the group of 40 men. Like, that was the name. So I'm not
Troy Boys. Is that reference to Troy, New Hampshire?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the Troy Boys?
No.
See, I have, but I guess given that, I'm a little bit younger, And the stories that were told to me throughout like the history of Keene probably definitely played like a game of like telephone. I was under the impression if any groups ever existed within Keene, I guess you could call them gangs. But if any groups ever existed, that they were really almost like from a protection perspective, like we just protect our neighborhoods sort of thing. That's how everything was always described to me. And honestly, whenever the Troy boys were described to me or I heard of the Troy boys, that's what I thought. Every so often getting into a little bit of mischief, but certainly not murders. A couple of other historic groups have been explained to me like that too. And so it's really interesting to see this outlined this way and see what some of these guys actually ended up getting charged with doing, because they were robbing and murdering. And it seemed like they would do house invasions. And if it had to go wrong, then it went wrong, because the end result was essentially robbery. So I know you said
they just didn't want to be identified.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the people that actually did end up getting, the murder charges in the Mahoney trial were, I have no clue if it's true or not, but were definitely named in articles as the leaders of this 40 men gang in Keene. Like some of the articles were like, over the span of a couple of years, this gang of 40 men terrorized this region.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like,
I've never heard of this.
Oh, I know. I
I've
hadn't either.
never heard of this.
You never know until you pull it up.
And nobody talked about it.
I know.
Like, my family grew up in this area.
Right.
They've never talked about it. I don't ever remember hearing anything about this from anybody.
Right.
From anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 25 miles from Keene.
Right.
Have been for 40 years. I've never heard anybody talk about this. That's just...
Well, and I mean, and not just that, Jane, especially specific to you, you have ties to northern Massachusetts as well. So like,
yes,
the entire region that they're talking about, it's like your footprint. It's like where you are. It's
I practically grew up in Fitchburg.
Right. Right.
That is just crazy. Boy, I guess, well, I guess you don't hear a lot about this stuff now back then. Right. Because there was no social media.
Right. Right.
You'll now anything, somebody drops a flipping cigarette butt on the sidewalk in Keene, it's all over social media. So everything that's going on in Keene and the surrounding area because of social media. So I guess that makes sense that we would have never heard about it because there was really no social media back then. So you kind of wonder how many people in this area actually did know about this.
Right.
I
don't know. And remember, so the Keene Sentinel isn't actually in the newspapers.com database. So I have no clue what the Keene Sentinel had actually posted about this. I'm sure they had to have broke it, but the only place where I found was in the Lowell Sun. So Lowell was writing about it.
Yeah.
Lowell was writing about Keene.
That's crazy.
It is. It is. And so the reason why this article ended up popping up and shocking me in all sorts of different ways, it made me just really sit there and think, was because obviously Judith's case was listed as one of the unsolved murders that was essentially being reevaluated now that they had an informant, someone giving information from inside this 40-member men gang that was based in Keene, New Hampshire. So, I mean, just reevaluated. They weren't ever, mentioned as, persons of interest or suspects or anything like that. Technically, I don't think that there were ever any persons of interest or any suspects in Judith's case.
My gosh, it's sad that Judith's case is still unsolved.
Yes.
If you know something, say something. It's been a long time. Long time.
Yeah.
It's funny how everything comes full circle. Like, you dig into one thing and then all of a sudden you hear about this and then you hear about this and then you see this and then you see this. And that is just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It absolutely was.
Uh,
I mean, and you actually brought up something really interesting and really a good point, Jane, too, with different places where you grew up. Were you in Fitchburg around 73, 74, like around that time span? Were you
yes,
actually there? You were in
yes.
Fitchburg? Yep. Did you ever hear about any of the, do you remember ever hearing about any of these cases that were,
No,
no?
never.
Hmm.
Nope. But I was 73, 74. Well, I was born in 66.
Okay.
So I wasn't even
You,
10.
yeah, you wouldn't
Yeah.
be paying attention to papers.
No,
Yep. Yep. Okay. Yep.
no.
Yep. So you were younger, but yeah,
Still, I don't see a real motive
I don't either.
connecting with that group of
Hmm.
gang or whatever you want to call it with Judith's case.
I don't either. I think,
To me, Judith's case seems more personal.
uh-huh.
Like I want to say she knew the person,
Yeah.
and it was something very personal. Her attack was very personal.
Yeah.
That's what I see, because that's the only thing that would make sense.
Yeah.
In her case.
Hmm. Yep.
How would they know to go in her backyard and go up that path?
Yeah.
It's somebody that had been there before. I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Because why, or unless they came in the house and she ran up that path and they chased after her. That would be the only way that they would know about that path behind her house. Unless they had been there before.
That is true. Yep.
So that's why I'm kind of leaning with hers. I'm kind of leaning with she knew who they were.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that, even though, I mean, obviously Judith's case was listed within this massive article about the Keene link and the gang, I personally don't believe that any of those individuals were necessarily connected to Judith's case at all. I just think what the police departments were doing because of the vicinity is they were just doing their due diligence and making sure that there weren't any connections to any of the known people within that there weren't any actual connections to any of the cases.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think too.
Yeah, because it wasn't just Judith's case that was listed. It was the Joanne and Deborah, the 20-year-olds that were killed in their apartment, the Clara Provost, Marsha Time, and they were all listed in this, as well as other people as well from Shrewsbury or Fitchburg.
So all those cases listed, they still remain unsolved, correct?
Which cases are you referring to?
All the cases that you mentioned.
So yes, all the cases that I just sort of like summarized, like at the recap, all of them do remain unsolved except for Clara Jean Provost. And Ronald C. Dame was found guilty of her murder in 2012. He proclaims his innocence, even though his DNA was found underneath her fingernails.
You can't fight DNA. Mm-hmm. DNA does not lie.
No. Nope. DNA, as we've been able to find out through digging into other interesting, researching cases, DNA may not always directly pinpoint someone, but it doesn't lie. It can most definitely exclude, with the differences we found between, mitochondrial and all the different types of DNA and stuff like that. But you're right. DNA does not lie.
So thank you for listening today to Amanda and I on Invisible Tears. And if you have any information on any of the cases that we talked about today, Amanda will post all the contact information for you to either call or email or leave an anonymous tip. So she will be posting all that information.
Thank you all for listening to this episode of Invisible Tears. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. You can find us on all platforms through our link tree in the show notes. There you can find our social media platforms, our YouTube, and our website with our merch. You can also find our Patreon there. So if you're interested in supporting and joining the Invisible Tears team, join our Patreon today. And as always, ratings and recommendations help our podcast in algorithms. So if you haven't shown us some love and given us a 5-star rating and review, please do so. We appreciate each and every one of you and your continued support.